Hello there. Um, this is me again. At long last, I've gone to the end of the reading we talked about a couple of days back. But I'd like to start the presentation to read a line from the book we're going to talk about today. Here it is. I started work at the Café Galileo at the beginning of the term. The cafe's owner, Mark, did not smile much and was watchful at all times, like a herdsman with his flock. His eyes roved over everything, and he was everywhere, supervising in the kitchen, helping out with preparation of food, serving at tables, sitting behind the till, and when regular customer he liked came in, and it was not too busy, he would take coffee with them and relax in conversation. That's the first thing I wanted to read to you. Then, this is the narrator speaking, right? The narrator is within the story. Then one Sunday morning, I found out for sure a disheveled-looking and hungover Mark sat silently, sipping a strong coffee, looking exhausted. Then he said to me, speaking warily, "Salim, where are you from with a name like that?" I poured him another coffee and said, "Zanzibar." Mark whistled in a way that was meant to show surprise and appreciation. That's a long way away in Africa, isn't it? Way down there below the equator, the other side of the world. I nodded and waited for what I thought was coming next. The dark continent, darkest Africa, he said obligingly. Zanzibar, he continued, using its old Arabic name. We read about that as children in Lebanon. His real name was Musa, he said, but for business purposes he called himself Mark. It made customers feel more comfortable. Fine, eh? Zanzibar. So he pronounced the name with the Arabic accent, if I may say. So, of course, if you're knowledgeable about this, then you know what kind of author, which author we're going to talk about it today. But yes, we're going to talk about Zanzibar, and Zanzibar brings us straight to the 2021 Nobel Prize winner, Mr. Abdulrazak Gurnah, right? Or Abdulrazak Gurnah, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So that's the thing. But before we just go through the details of the story we have here in this book called Gravel Heart by Abdulrazak Gurnah. We talked about that book not long ago. Before that, then, let's just talk about what was Zanzibar. What is Zanzibar? Well, Zanzibar is an archipelago, a group of islands off the coast of what used to be Tanganyika, or which is now Tanzania, naturally. So it's a group of islands, with one of them, the biggest one, being Unguja. And with the capital city Pemba, and that's what we're talking about, that group of island. And I'm told that the group of island have been inhabited for the last 20,000 years. So it's been there when it had been there when the Portuguese set foot on those islands around 1496 something. So that's Zanzibar. Um, it's a very interesting place to be for traders. That what it is. I mean, this is kind of a place where traders have met all along the East African coast. Then, of course, it was a trade base, as we said, for merchants, and those merchants and traders would come from places like the Great Lakes, the Somali Peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula, Iran, India, the Indian subcontinent. So it's really a place where cultures mix a bit, but it was mostly about trade, of course. So that is Zanzibar at the time. So we talked about the Portuguese, also Vasco da Gama. The island became a Portuguese kind of possession, if we might say. They took control of that island in 1498, I am told, and the island remained under the Portuguese control for about 200 years. So that's the Zanzibar we're talking about here. Then, of course, after the Portuguese, then the Oman Sultanate, a couple of miles away from that. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's the should neighbors from the Arabic Peninsula. So the Omani Sultanate took control of that Zanzibar and turned it into what books call the Spice Island, because they would produce there, of course, a number of things. Trade would be thriving there in Zanzibar with the Omani who took control of the island. They would trade mainly spices, which are being cultivated on the island by the Bantu population, right, the blacks of the island. So we see here people from Arabic or Arab descent controlling the island and being the aristocracy, the Muslim elite, the Muslim aristocracy, shall we say, of the island. And of course the Bantu people, the blacks, would be working as slavered farmers, we might say. So the island would be trading spices, elephant tusks, but mostly the island would be also a crossroad to the slave trade. So the island would also be trading slaves for the benefit of the Arab countries around, but also for the benefit of a couple of European countries, naturally. So that is the Zanzibar under the control of the Omani Sultanate. Then, of course, the island, a couple of centuries later, became fell, shall we say, under the British control. So it became a British protectorate in 1890. So Zanzibar became, quote, British in 1890. So for the British, the idea was, of course, to try. They were not very, they did not totally agree with the succession. I mean, kind of the Omani dynasty of the Busaid, who had been ruling Zanzibar for a number of years or a number of centuries. So the British kind of turned Zanzibar under their control. They turned Zanzibar into, shall we say, an independent sort of constitutional monarchy. So they made it a constitutional monarchy in December, shall we say, December 1963, right? So that is, it became, the island became independent, right? But that was a very short-lived story. It's going to be a very short-lived story because a couple of months later, a revolution erupted. A revolution started by people who have been sort of the underdogs of that society dominated by people from Arabic descent. So they came up with a revolution to create what they called a socialist republic, the Socialist Republic of Zanzibar. So it was indeed the Zanzibar Revolution in 1963. In the process of turning out or disrupting the entire establishment, Arab establishment, the revolutionaries in that process slain people of Arab Indian descent by the thousands. Because they really wanted it becomes a kind of sort of upsy-turvy society, sort of. They wanted to change things because they were kind of a bit fed up with those racial iniquities, racial segregation, racial everything, right? But they were, Bantu people were denied strategic positions in the administration. So that was mainly the cause of that revolution. So they slain Arabs and Indians by the thousands. So this is the story. Kind of these eruptions we see here in history would appear also in the book. What we see is really what some sort of faction. So it's fiction, but between the line we could see the eruptions or the, shall we say, the violent breakouts, movements of people throughout throughout the novel. Between the lines we can feel that naturally. So this is the Zanzibar that Abdulrazak Gurnah is talking about. But then, of course, the revolution which promised, shall we say, a paradise for Bantu people, the revolution which promised, shall we say, a betterment of daily lives in Unguja, Pemba, Zanzibar city, that those promises never came true, if we might say. Those promises remained unkept, right? Because what came after the revolution was just kind of some sort of a dictatorship, some sort of a leftist dictatorship supported by the Democratic Republic of Germany, the DDR, who came supporting the building of flats and things to try to improve the living conditions of the population of Zanzibar. But it turned out to be really a real and fair dictatorship. So this is what we have there. The revolution just came up was a flop, we might say. The revolution came up as a definitive a flop. A couple of months after that revolution, then of course we know the Zanzibar decided to merge with Tanganyika, which was yet another British colony just in the mainland. They merged and to create in April 1963 a country, the country we call today Tanzania. Tanzania, capital city Dar es Salaam. So this is a brief story, a very brief history of that Zanzibar. Abdulrazak Gurnah is talking about. Okay, that is the first part, Zanzibar.